So we're going to give one of these talks. I've given these talks over the years, several of them. But this one is a bit more interesting compared to usual. So we've been settling the last details of this project. So the good news, this is a 10-year project that's been in the works. For those who don't know the background, it was in staging for a little bit, it left staging, and now we're doing another attempt to actually submit this upstream. So, and I saw from the poll, 87% actually want to see this. So this is actually something that's well-driven. So what are the requirements and improvements for submission and where they're at? So one of the things we have is libcfs, and libcfs exists. It's our little compatibility library, so that is cleaned up and done. So if you look at it today, it's nothing but like the debugging system. All the extra cruft, the hash tables, the crypto checksumming stuff, all moved out. So there's a lot of changes to that. Now there's a couple impacts to that. One is LNet has the debugging material. Most of it is there. We even have a debugfs file now that we use for the LCUDL markers. So you can actually inject through debugfs. You don't even need to use a tool. So that was a nice little improvement. There was a lot of weird macro stuff, like the atomic stuff on Arshad from Eon. He's done a great job. He's removed that. So really great work. So it's all cleaned up. So we have using our tracing system to use the kernel ring buffer, our own version of that, and it would allow us to watch in real time. That work hasn't been done yet. We have to update the crash utility. So we've introduced in 2.16, there's a plugin for the crash utility for you people who can't like share your debug logs because there's sensitive material in it. It actually filters it and will only extract the Lustre logs. So that way you can actually give debugging information to your support staff. So that exists now, actually. But we do have to update it because there's going to be some changes to that. And of course, we use the fault injection. There's a kernel API for that. We have a custom version. That's not too hard to update. Just get around to it. And of course, the one big thing is that our hash table stuff is we have our own hash table implementation. So all that's left on the client side is the LDLM layer. And the only reason we have a patch, it's ready to land. The only reason it hasn't landed is because of RHEL 7, which Oleg is still using for his debug kernels. And RCU does not function very well in RHEL 7. It's a mess. So, and that's one of the nice things is once we get rid of RHEL 7, we can use some of our RCU locks. They're a much, much better performing way to do this. And of course, the big thing was for LNet was IP version 6. And as you know, most of that has been finished. That was our biggest change we had to do. And now we're ready for that. We also have to simplify the IB driver. So while that will make the GDS stuff from NVIDIA much harder to deal with, it makes it much harder. And actually, while I was in the Linux conference last week, I met some NVIDIA guys, and they know the GDS guys, and they had interesting words about them. So there was some issues in the past with our IB LND driver, and we have to clean that up. I would love to push it with the push that will happen. And of course, as always, we're tracking. There's still some changes that are upstream that haven't gone into the OpenSFS branch. It's very few, though. Mostly of LNet with IOVEX, and it's because of RHEL 7 again. Okay. So there's a couple things left. That's left. There's only a few things that are left that really, really need to be done in the native client before it's submitted. One of the big changes is we've introduced K unit tests to test for regressions. So we did the interval trees. That's all been resolved now, and we can scale better with the LDM locks. And we actually use the Linux version. We don't have our own anymore. And then also the FID cache handling, decache issues. There's some changes that have gone upstream that we don't have yet. Rel 7 again doesn't like those kind of changes. They do show up in bugs, and I'm trying to work on resolving that, but I haven't got around to the cycles to do that just yet. And of course, the biggest change that you'll see is the death of proc. So if you look today on the latest code, proc is almost gone. Like there's only a couple files left on the client. Of course, this has led to some issues with debugfs. So we have to use debugfs for our more complex things, like our stats and our target OBDs and stuff. So the good news is that, well, there's a issue with this move. The thing is we didn't want to break like a lot of tools out there. And we actually found out that like a lot of container systems disable debugfs. So that actually disappears from underneath you. So there's a Netlink API that's been developed so you can use that instead as a normal user to collect the data. And also we wanted to, so you have to link to the library to get it. Though there have been some discussions, and actually we want to create some wrappers for this with Go and Python. So I'm very interested in the work that Azar did for the Go bindings. So this way it can be done with, you can do your scripting magic with Python and stuff to do this. And so the only things that are left, the most important, are the target OBD structures in the pool list. And I have already the target OB patch. I submitted that. It's one of the last things. So a lot of our tools actually go and analyze the target OSTs in the background. And that's in debugfs, but now you can get it through Netlink. And if you're a normal user and you try to use your userland tools, it won't break on you. For a long time, if somebody tried to play with the native client, they couldn't do things as a normal user. There's a couple other things that aren't a hard requirement, but they are going to change. We have a new mount type, so on the server. So it's not, you don't mount with just Lustre, you mount with Lustre_TGT. So that goes through the server code. So if you mount with Lustre, the target Lustre, it goes from the server into the client code and around and then back. That is not a proper way to do this. And eventually, please move your systems to update your scripts, because we're going to split the server and the client completely, and that won't work always in the future. Yeah. So, and of course, we have to do a ALSR. So there's a patch for that. So one of the things is we expose pointers from internal in the kernel that's considered a security violation. So we're working on that. And also, we do kind of some crazy stuff with mounting and cleanup, because our Portal RPC threads are still running when you go to unmount, so there can be actually backlogs. And so we do certain things with our mounts, unmounting, so that we flush the RPC and not return busy. That's actually considered incorrect behavior. And of course, using Netlink for HSM, like all the other tools. The other thing that you see a lot of the work, as we saw on the amount of contributions, like Tim and Arshad and stuff, we've been trying to meet all the standards. Most of it's been cleaned up. We've updated the check patch stuff. The other thing that was really neglected, but Arshad has really stepped up to the plate, is the doc style. So he's actually been doing a lot of work in updating all the documentation to the proper kernel Sphinx style. And he actually tested to make sure it actually can make docs. I don't even know if most kernel developers actually test that to see if it works. And of course, we're always updating the branch, the tree, to support all the newest GCCs and kernels. Sean has done a great job from HPE for that. What we need to really work on is the FSCrypt API to support it natively with all the newest clients that we're supporting. We tend to lag in that. There's a lot of, I haven't had the cycles to do that. And of course, we're going to split, as I said, there's some work the next bit of work is we're going to be splitting the server and clients much more cleanly than it is now. It's really intertangled. There's a lot of as I go through the code, I notice there's more and more server bits that are scattered here and there that don't really need to be there. Nope. And I do want to give thanks to the people involved in this project. Wait. You didn't get my latest update slide. This is my older slide. There's bits missing. Uh-oh, okay. I'm really sorry about this. There's a lot more to this than was here. I didn't realize that. I'm sorry, folks, that it got missed up. All right, so probably the most important thing that we need to discuss. So last week, I went to Montreal to meet with the Linux, the VFS maintainers. And we presented our plan for submission. And in that submission, we discussed our road plan, and they accepted it. They liked what we suggested and we're going to do. So there's a roadmap. So there's a couple changes that are big. As you were talking about LTS releases, one of the things we found from cloud vendors is they want to LTS every year from Lustre. So the way they deploy is they deploy the latest version of Lustre, and then they expect patches for just that version, and then the next year they just drop it and they move on to the next one. Very different from our current HPC environments. So that's a little bit of a big change, and that's why Ubuntu's more supported in the cloud environments, because they update every year their kernels and everything like that. So that was one of the demands for that. The other thing is I do have a tree on GitHub. So that tree will be being moved to kernel.org. So we're going to have a kernel.org tree. Linus likes to only pull from there. And we will also have a new mailing list for those patches, because the way they do it is on the kernel mailing list and that with the patches that you submit, there's actually a mail ID that's done. It's like a git commit ID. So they can use that to track patches in there. So you'll be seeing a new mailing list, but we'll still be using Lustre Devel. So those two patches will be sent to those two lists, because I explained it to them about the patch list. And then when we do the new kernel tree, Konstantin will be working with me. He's the maintainer of kernel.org. He's going to help me maintain our history, so when we create the new tree, we won't lose the history. They have done this before on other projects. Ted Sao will be meeting with me every so often to discuss the project. So the thing you're probably wondering is when is the goal date of sending this upstream? And it's going to be September of this year. So that's when it's going to be done. And then hopefully we can get some other stuff in to match the release. Of course, there's going to be some changes about what we're doing. As you can see, we've been splitting the compact code out and restructuring the tree. So there's other changes you're going to see in your deployment, like the number of modules. So right now, Lustre has over 20-some modules. It's only going to be a couple. That's going to change. That's another structural change. And we discussed that we're going to do possibly a Lustre 3.0, but that's gone back and forth because of these changes, these architectural changes. And Tim is working on some patches so that when we submit patches, we're going to have a way to send patches to the mailing list for the kernel as well as Garrett. So that's going to end up flowing both directions. So that's all these type of projects in the works. And of course, there was the discussion of server. That's not going to happen just yet. That's probably 6 months later, but it's definitely within less than a year because it's in pretty good shape. And they agreed that it would be best to do the client. And do you have any questions? I'm sorry it was short because the slides, the pieces were missing.
So James, what will it mean for people running Lustre and ZFS if the server goes into the kernel?
Well, so Brian, are you going to host our OSD?
Yeah, I don't know exactly how that would work if the server went into the kernel. How that would work with ZFS, I guess it could be built on the side, perhaps. I don't know.
Yeah.
You mentioned there are 20 plus modules in Lustre. Is version management or mismatch an issue, or it's all tightly coupled?
So it's a lot of it is just, it's a lot of modules, and it's easy. It's kind of a fragile system if you think about it. So they just want to reduce it down to a sane amount of modules. And also, we do intercommunications between the modules with various function. We create these structures with function pointers to call from one module to another. And that's not the best way, and it makes it harder to read the code, to follow the code path. So this way, we can just unroll those and actually call the functions, and you'll be able to follow a lot better.
But in the current system, is version mismatches a problem, that the wrong version of module got loaded with some version?
Oh, you're talking about like if you're using an OpenSFS version versus ours. So we've had discussions about that, because currently what we do is our version mismatch, we actually change that OpenSFS is like one version above it, so it always will select those modules. Tim said that's not really the best way to do that, and we should keep those in sync. But you can do stuff in the build structure to do depend mod to actually construct for your local setup, so it will be selected preferentially. So we're always going to favor the OpenSFS branch for now, until everything's upstream and done.
I mean, in a normal Lustre build, I mean, when we're not talking about upstream versus, out of tree or whatever, there's never any problem with version. You always build the whole set of modules and install the whole set all the time. So they're always just one set of modules. I mean, if you really tried, you could have, potentially a mismatch between like the user space commands and the kernel modules, but that's almost never either.
Yeah.
Other question? Oh, Tim.
Yeah, so there's a little bit of context on the ZFS server-side stuff. So eventually when the server goes upstream, maybe after 6 months after the client, so ext4 will go upstream alongside it. The exact changes that ext4 will need aren't super clear, but there's going to exist some kind of API between, ext4 and Lustre, whether that's mediated through the VFS or not. And ZFS will basically just code against that. That's kind of how I envision it right now. Some of the details aren't really super worked out, but I think absolute worst case scenario, you might need, server-side kernel patch just to export some stuff that ZFS needs. That's absolute worst case scenario, but it should still work in the future, even after we go upstream.
Hey, James. How do you envision to harmonize the Lustre version between the client side and the server side once you have everything in tree? For example, we have some enterprise customers who are kind of unwilling to upgrade their Linux kernel very aggressively. They prefer staying on the stable older versions like 7.9, RHEL 7.9, for example. Still runs on 3.10. If they have like a Lustre client issue, how would you propose them to upgrade?
That is part of the details we're working out. So that you're gonna have to go to your distribution people and work with the we're gonna have to work closely with the distros to actually push these changes. So in LTS releases, whatever we label as fixes, that is scanned and then pulled back and put into the LTS release. So it depends on how often you're going to update your incremental kernels for your distro. But there is a process to do this.
Couple of questions. How would this affect the Lustre development process upstream? Have we made a decision? You said patches will be sent to the upstream and will still use Jared. So will patches land independently upstream and in Lustre? Is there a sync? Has there been a decision made there?
So, so patches, there is going to be a gatekeeper, and we're going to have our own separate tree. But yes, you're right. So the way we tend to do patches, it's gotten better over the years. But we tend to make patches that are kernel and tool changes and test all at once. That's gonna have to be broken up because you're gonna be sending it upstream as well as doing the tools and the testing as a separate patch. So that there is gonna have to be a little bit of changes in that behavior. Like I said too, we're gonna have it so for a while, patches are gonna be submitted simultaneously with a lot of magic. We're gonna morph the patches and send them up simultaneously to both trees for a while.
Okay, and regarding testing, on the Lustre develop thread, which was related to this effort, I think it was Sado who had a few objections regarding testing. Is there going to be any additional testing put in place, or are we relying on effectively on distributors to, release tested versions? Is there
I don't know if you saw the discussion on FS Devel, but we did talk about including it, and there are various test suites, and also there's zero-day exploits and all that kind of stuff. That's going to be included with Lustre. We've had that in the past before when we were in staging. So we're going to have additional testing on top. They talked about, wasn't it, Tim, they said about integrating some stuff with Lustre into FS test?
Yeah, at some point that'll happen, probably around the time the client lands.
Yeah.
It'll be a little bit tricky to test just because the server will still be out of the tree, but we'll have at least some way for upstream maintainers to do some amount of testing.
Yeah, so they're going to be VFS maintainers testing Lustre as well. Now the good news is this kind of testing has been done for like Ceph. Ceph has a user space backend, so this is not something unusual for them, and they said that was not a barrier.
I was just going to say about the compatibility thing. I mean, for older kernels, right? I mean, we'll still have the out-of-tree module for RHEL 7 and things like that, right?
Yeah.
It was just, moving forward with once it's in tree, it'd be like getting any other fix in a kernel, right?
Yeah, it's going to be just like that. It's not going to be, and in fact, we're working on trying to separate the compatibility module so that there's a separate thing. So eventually, we'll just work with the out-of-tree, the in-kernel code. One of the things that Tim proposed was that eventually you're going to see in the Lustre branch that we'll pull down from the kernel and put it into the OpenSFS tree and build against it and do that kind of development style.
So James, you mentioned that there's going to be a gatekeeper designated. So has that been already decided who that will be?
Well, are you familiar with the GPG key signing thing? And because Ted saw my face, he made me sign the key.
Okay. that's what I assumed, but I
yes. So
didn't say explicitly.
So if we want like Oleg to be also the gatekeeper, he needs to meet with the VFS developers and get a key. If he has not done this already, I don't know if he has.
Yeah.
But you have a key, so you could be as well a gatekeeper. Yeah.
Right. And do we know, I mean, in terms of your ongoing involvement, do you know what kind of proportion of your time that's going to take? Is that something Oak Ridge is okay with you doing on an ongoing basis? I just know it is a very time-consuming activity to do it well.
They've supported me this far.
Oh, I know.
Yeah.
It's a difference to sort of incremental versus a long-term commitment here, right?
Yeah. I get that, and I think, and to make sure, we should always have more than one gatekeeper in case of, I get hit by a bus kind of scenario. That does happen.
I think there's one thing I'll add about Lustre development happens mostly in Garrett. There's a lot of development that happens, Linux kernel is mailing list oriented. That was one point that was brought up. We should be able to continue using Garrett for the most part as long as the eventual patches land on the list at some point. So we'll be able to have a development model that's fairly similar to what we do now. I think there's still a lot of open questions. Probably have to talk to Andres, Peter Jones, and everyone else just to sort out what some of the logistics will look like, but seems like there's a path forward.
So I do want to bring up the one big barrier right now, and Sean is working on it, is the Philo stuff. So struct page is pretty much going to go away. It's going to just be a pointer to a Philo structure. So that is going to cause massive breakage in our code and stuff. Now the benefit is the Philo stuff. Matt Wilcox, he says that you get 2 to 3x performance on the I/O by using that.
I guess, James, do you know what distros, what releases would be targeted first?
Whoever will pick up the LTS, that's why Ted said you gotta have it by September, push something. We're gonna continue to do some pushes because we don't know when Linus is gonna cut it. So one LTS is picked every year toward Christmas time, Thanksgiving, Christmas, and that becomes an LTS for the cloud vendors. That's why, so Ubuntu, we're gonna see it by next year, a client. There's gonna be a client there. In the Ubuntu's. RHEL, I don't know when they're gonna pick that up. RHEL gets to choose what our LTS is gonna be for Lustre, because that's what's gonna show up, is what we don't have control over that.
Okay. Thank you, James. And we can thank James again.
After 10 years, it's finally done.
Very close. Yeah.